Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today I'll be talking about bots. So, what is the purpose of this video? Well, there are multiple purposes. For once, this is a video that I'll be actually actively forwarding to Wargaming to just make them aware of some suggestions. And this is also a video where I'm just really going to be talking about some theories that I have and some ideas. So, bots. Let's begin with, and I'll let some bot footage run in the background, but that's just so so you have something moving on the screen rather than looking at a still image while I'm talking for 15 minutes, which is not as interesting for a video. But let's talk about bots. First item, where did bots come from? Why is this important? Well, you might know that I work in IT. Now, I don't work in game development. I have written a couple of games many years ago, but like really long time ago on Android, but I have been out of that for ages. But I do work in IT, and I always try to understand why certain things have been done the way they are. Because at work, generally, we have one premise, which is always assume good intent at the time. So some people don't do things maliciously. They usually have a reason, and they usually... it usually helps to assume that they did things for because they were trying to find the best solution at the time. So where did bots come from? Well, bots have actually been there at the release from the very beginning. I think. I mean, I haven't played at release, but I've played relatively early, and I'm reasonably certain the bots were already there. Which makes sense, right? Because if you're releasing a new game, you're not going to have an awful lot of players who can play against each other at the beginning. No one's got any higher tier ships. Some people will play more, some people will play less, some people will progress through the tech trees more quickly. And you need to give them something to shoot at, because this is, after all, a naval shooting game. So bots make sense, right? And this is also, you can see this, because we only have the original USN and IGN lines, so not the IGN gunboat destroyers, not the alternative battleships, only the original lines are present as bots. So my first theory would be that, well, you add the bots such that people have something to shoot at. Or, people just don't want to play against other people, but primarily probably for people to have something to shoot at. Which means that this is very, very old code. The bot control code is probably, again, this is just purely my theory, is probably very old code. There are a couple of years behind this. That means that it's also entirely possible that the people who originally wrote the old code and the bots are no longer around, and that it now has to be maintained by people who weren't necessarily there when the initial decisions were made. All theories, none of that is confirmed. I'm just putting that out there. Why does any of this matter, Terry? Why are you talking about bots? Well, I'm glad you asked. For two reasons. First of all, and I've realized this playing on the Asian server, there are people who like to play cooperative battles. So if you switch the game mode to play against AI, you play with human players, if there are any, against bots. You never play against human players. There seem to be a lot of people who enjoy doing this. I don't know if they're grinding. You don't get quite as many resources for these kind of battles. I don't know if they're grinding for medals. No idea, but whatever their motivation, maybe they just don't like playing against other people. Whatever their motivation, there are definitely people doing this. And not just in bottom tiers, right? Also in, I've seen this in tier 10 games. Maybe they're just testing something. I generally play against bots for testing purposes. If I want to test certain things, but I don't want my team to suffer. Because if I test something in a live game and I do stupid stuff to try it out, my team suffers. And I don't want that. So I test it in co-op games against bots. The other reason is matchmaking, because in one of the more or less recent updates, not one of the really recent ones, but it was already quite a while ago, matchmaking has been changed quite a bit and can be very aggressive in throwing bots in. I mean, you see it that the games I feature in reviews often have bots in them, and I'm trying. Even playing during peak times, I'm trying to capture battles that are mostly populated by human players, but oftentimes matchmaking will wait for 5 seconds and then just populate half the teams with bots. So that means even if you do not want to actively play against bots, you are going to be facing bots, inevitably, because of matchmaking. What are the problems then with bots? Well, once again, let's assume good intent and that people were looking for solutions at the time when the game was released. When you release a game, you have time to market, you have no experience, you have no player base, no feedback. You may have some testing, but you're in a rush, you try to get something out. And what are the problems that are now that we now experience today with bots that, once again, I theorized are very, very old code? Bots don't have maneuverability stats or restrictions. They can move, like they can just turn. They can turn on a dime, and you see it. Bot ships, the biggest bot battleship can just start spinning on a dime and do the stupidest maneuvers. Why in the hell, and I've asked myself, why in the hell would somebody do that? Now, if I'm a programmer and somebody says, okay, we're about to release this game, we're going to need some bots. We're going to just need some AI in big air quotes, because this is nothing to do with AI. We just need some algorithms, some pathfinding, some mechanics to make bots work. What are the problems that you're having? Well, you have two main problems. You need to tell the bot where to go, where not to go, and what to shoot at. And the where not to go part can get relatively difficult because maps contain islands. So if bots keep bonking into islands, that means they get stuck, and then it takes them a long time to get unstuck, and they would just look stupid. And you would effectively have a problem of bots just being stuck on islands relatively frequently if they were just going ahead. Now, you could say, okay, develop me some code that makes the bot not run into an island. You know, make the bot aware of what an island is, and just just steer in a timely manner to avoid the island. One theory that I have is that people were in a rush and said, what's an easier solution? Well, just remove the maneuverability restrictions. If the bot's about to run into an island, we'll just make it turn around. And every ship can just turn around on a dime and go steer into a different direction. One theory why, just to avoid map collisions. Bots not running into each other or into islands is a lot easier if they don't have maneuverability restrictions, because you don't need the ahead of time recognition that you're about to run into something. You can literally say, once the collision warning pops up, just spin the ship around by 45 degrees and go in a different way. Something like that. The other problem that bots have is insta-turret traverse. They can have the turrets pointing in one direction, and then once they're reloaded, suddenly shoot in the other direction. Extremely annoying for players, because you look at a gun turret, see where it's pointed, you're like, oh, it's not pointing at me, and then it's a bot, and then floop, the turrets come the other way around and suddenly start shooting at you. Why would you do that? I mean, why would you actively remove a restriction that is in your game mechanics for bots to work this way? My theory is that this has to do with targeting, because how do you decide for a bot what to shoot at? Well, easiest is to shoot at whatever is closest, because you have the best chance of hitting it. And you can see that today, bots are proximity targeting. They shoot at whatever is closest to them. So you find whatever is closest to you and then shoot that. The problem is that means you're switching targets a lot. So if you are implementing the turret traverse restrictions, especially on something like a battleship, that means that most of the time it's not going to be able to shoot at anything unless you spin the ship around on a dime. But it's also that an easy workaround for that is to just remove that restriction and get the bot be able to shoot at one side and then shoot at the other side without having to swing the turrets around. The bots are ignoring objectives. So bots don't go and cap anything. That's something that you see today. That is, interestingly enough, actually a pretty decent emulation of the early player base in lower tiers. I don't know if this is something that was done intentionally or if it was just too hard to make bots do that, because you have to balance it, right? But if bots were meant at the beginning, and I think, you don't know what your player base is going to look like. You don't know how many players you're going to get. You don't know how many things. So my assumption, if I was in that position, would be, okay, bots are going to be there mostly for lower tiers in order to fill up the battles, and because people will progress through the tiers. So bots also can't be too smart. So, because beginners in the game, lower tier players, aren't too smart as well, and you want bots to be weak enough for people to have a satisfying experience. Somebody who doesn't know anything about the game is going to face off against some bots. You want them to win. You don't want them to lose. So that might be one reason. I don't know if it was intentional to do that sort of thing. The other really outrageous bug, and there are many, but the one outrageous bug is the smokescreen detection bug, where when you're in a smokescreen, the bot detects you. Now, I think this has something to do with, once again, the bot code being relatively old, and I would not be surprised if the bot code was actually because they had to remove these restrictions of maneuverability, turret traverse, and such. Probably copy-pasted from actual game code that controls regular player ships into some other area just so they could quickly disable these things, and now it became the special bot control module. Pure speculation. I don't know any about these things, but I'm just putting it out there. I say these are decisions you make in order to get the game released. They are shortcuts you take that can bite you later on, but you have to, because otherwise you'll never be finished. So we had also bugs with smoke screens, not until relatively recently. It has been fixed in one of the 4.x updates, I think, but we did have bugs in smoke screens that smoke screens didn't work, or it took them a long time to work. And it's entirely possible that they fixed that in the player path of the player control module, but not in the bot control module. It's possible that the bots are still sitting on the same buggy code that we had in the other side that occasionally ignores smoke screens. So all kinds of possibilities of how we got where we are. But I think we all agree that bots are a problem today. And we've talked about this why, and we talked about the problems. But what can we do about it? Now, what is the incentive to improve bots? Because if it's old code and it's probably unmaintained and people who wrote it initially and made the design decisions may not be around anymore, you don't want to touch that code generally. It's not a great thing to touch. What is the investment? Is there going to be a large investment? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to see a massive bot rewrite because you have to also not make the bots too smart. Because the early game, the new players are facing them, so you want them to be successful. So we need to be modest here. So what can we do about this, and what suggestions could we have in order to improve bots that are modest in terms of investment, but can resolve the glaring problems we have with either voluntarily or involuntarily facing bots that do stupid things that just make them look rather unprofessional. First of all, don't make the bots too strong. I actually developed a relatively elaborate system of skill, like randomized skill sets for different tiers, different tier sections, and I've ditched it all because I realized at the time, if I do that, the bots would probably be about as strong as, say, the upper third of the player base, which means for new players it'll be an absolute nightmare. And this has happened on PC because they made the bots smarter and people hated it because the people who played against bots in lower tiers just didn't have the skill set too much. So don't make them too strong. They should be emulating the behavior of the lower 25% of the player skill base. The smoke bug needs to be fixed because playing in destroys against bots is a nightmare. They have magic torpedo dodging powers, they have no maneuverability restrictions, they seem to be randomly shooting ammunition, which means that battleships can suddenly switch to HE and really, really hurt you. So add these maneuverability restrictions, because it just looks stupid. If you see a bot battleship spinning around on a dime and doing weird maneuvers and dodging your shells that way, it just looks unprofessional. I think that needs to be fixed, and that this is probably one of the larger parts, because you actually need to implement some form of collision detection, provided that was the reason for not doing it in the first place. Bots should use their default ammo always, because that's what people do in lower tiers, actually, oftentimes even in higher tiers. I mean, how many times have I seen Christopher Columbus firing semi-armor piercing at things that they probably should be firing armor piercing at. It just, the random selection of ammunition disadvantages player DDs too much. They should damage control single fires, because that's what players do. They should use heals. And maybe, if they have, they should use a smoke and sit still in it, because that's, again, what players would do. Bot CVs don't scout. They only start dropping once the first ship is spotted on the enemy team. They should just send their planes out straight ahead. Maybe. I know it's a difficult one, but we could avoid that. But at least they should retarget the torpedo bombers. Maybe like 10 seconds before they drop it. Once, right? That's still not going to hit anybody who's actively dodging, but at least they're not going to drop their torpedoes somewhere randomly in the countryside. And I think that's enough. That would already be enough, I think, to make the bots not look completely stupid. It will. I can't judge if it would be a massive investment, but it shouldn't be too bad, hopefully. And maybe this is something that can be done in order to just make bots, because we will face bots in run, even if we don't want to, in random battles, make things look a little bit more professional, and be also fairer across the ship classes. Because right now, with no damage control, with the random ammo selection, with the magic torpedo dodging, with the smoke screen negation, playing against bots as destroyers can be really, really frustrating. So, there you go. There you have it. Bots. What the problems are and how we could maybe improve them. And obviously the decision is always going to be down to Wargaming if and how much they want to invest in these things. I'm just here to make some suggestions. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.